Hello, everyone, and welcome to this chapter called Deviance. And deviance, you might think of it as you have your own definition, but we're going to be looking at this term from a sociological point of view. So let's talk about deviance, and I'm going to show you a couple of options. What might be deviant? Which of the four would you say is a deviant act? Would you pick maybe smoking indoors, right? Someone was smoking inside. What about if you decided to grow your own food? You didn't go to H-E-B and you simply grew everything. What if you wore a tuxedo daily, every day, even just to go to Stripes? Running errands, you would wear a tuxedo. And your fourth option, what if you dedicated your life to charity? You didn't work for money, you simply decided to work to help others, not for a check. Which would you say of these four things is a deviant act? Well, let's look at the definition before you take a pick. Here's the definition. Any violation of a social norm. So, in actuality, all of these four are deviant acts because they're not anything that a person typically does. Most people do not smoke indoors. They go outside. Most people go to H-E-B. Most people work for income. They don't dedicate the entire life for charity. And most people don't wear a tuxedo daily. So all four of these things would be a deviant act. So from a sociological standpoint, there you have it. For example, let's look at Japan. Japan has a lot of young people that are deviant. This is a little subculture. They're called Decora. They wear a lot of plastics, a lot of very childish things, and these are girls. They're not interested in a career. They're not interested in getting married. They don't focus on school. They don't focus on work. They just focus on play. So here we have some more examples of Decora. You see? So this would be an example of a deviant act. They're not necessarily doing anything bad. They're just doing their own thing. And then there are the Lolita girls, also of Japan. They kind of dress like a doll, essentially. And these costumes are very expensive. There's classic Lolita, country Lolita, gothic Lolita, sweet Lolita, and then there's sailor Lolita. Here's a girl from Sweden. This Lolita look has gone international. And then there's Guro Lolita to look really gory. Now, once again, they're not necessarily doing anything bad. They're simply refusing to take any responsibility. They're not working. They're not necessarily getting an education. So here we have some more examples of deviance from Japan. Now these are Lolita girls from here in the valley. So it's even gone. It's arrived here in the valley. And here I saw them at the movies. And so I took a picture with them. Cosplay, another example of a deviant subculture that's taken off in Japan. So there you have some more examples of deviance. So is deviance bad for society? Well, the answer is no. It could be good for society. Deviance doesn't have to be necessarily a bad thing. Here's a definition, make sure you know. It's called social control. Social control is the formal and informal means of enforcing norms. For example, here's Frank Sinatra. This is how singers used to look, right? They had a tie and a hat. And then Elvis came along and he changed all of that. Now, is Elvis breaking the formal or the informal rules of society? His hair is kind of long and he had sideburns. Sideburns were considered for very scummy people. Well, which rules is he breaking? He's breaking the informal because you can't get arrested simply for having sideburns and very long hair. Martin Luther King, he also was breaking the rules of society. He was speaking out against the laws that were for segregation. Here's Rosa Parks. She got arrested. This is her mugshot. So, for the informal, I want you to write down Elvis is an example of breaking the informal rules of society. Rosa Parks, she's an example of breaking the formal rules of society. She got arrested, and here's her mugshot. So make sure you know the definition of social control, formal and informal means of enforcing norms. Now here's a term, it's a fancy term. It's called differential association theory. Now differential association theory is something that your parents are familiar with. However, they don't know this very specific word. And you should know the definition. It says we are deviant or we fit in with the groups that we hang out with. So what happens is that when we start to hang out with somebody, we start to act like they do. For example, if they use a word all the time, we might using that word because we hear it every day. Or I don't know if you've ever seen one of your friends or a cousin, they start laughing like somebody. When people move to a different part of the world or even a different part of the state, they might even pick up an accent. So the reason your parents are always asking you, hey, who are you going to go out with, is because they know that we act differently according to the groups that we hang out with. They may not know this word, but they know what it means. So if you're hanging out with friends that dress a certain way, maybe you're going to copy the dress, the language, and this is called differential association theory. And it happens all the time. Even when couples start to go out, maybe they're going to listen to the music that they listen to and use some of the words. So it's a word that you're familiar with, but maybe you didn't know this exact definition. Now here's a picture of a truck. Now another way in which we might be deviant is when we start to hang out with a friend and all of a sudden the urge to do something risky increases when we're with somebody else. I put this picture because when I was in high school, a friend of mine, he picked me up and he had an old truck and he said, hey, why don't we go to the old railroad tracks and why don't we jump the truck? And so he picked me up and we went in the truck and then we jumped the railroad tracks. Now he could have done that by himself. He didn't need me. But for some reason he went to go pick me up, and this was a Saturday morning. He picked me up and we went out to the railroad tracks and we jumped the truck. Now, why didn't he want to do it by himself? Well, he wanted to do it with a friend. This is called risky shift. Engaging in riskier behavior than you would alone. And I'm sure you've been in this scenario where maybe you are hanging out with friends and they say, hey, why don't we do this thing? And if they were alone, they wouldn't do it. And if you were alone, you wouldn't do it. But you're hanging out with them, and so now things are a little bit different. And this is what we call risky shift. Now, there's another term that you need to be aware of. It's called control theory. It says we are controlled by our inner and outer controls. This simply means that there are forces that are influencing whether we're going to be deviant or not. Now, what do we mean by inner and outer controls? Inner controls would be your morality or your religious beliefs. Our outer controls would be the police or our parents. For example, I once had this guy that I was feuding with, and we didn't like each other, and I thought, you know what, maybe I should do something. But ultimately, even though I was wanting revenge, what stopped me was the inner, my moral compass. And so ultimately, I didn't do anything was thinking of, well, maybe I should do something. Maybe not this dramatic like this picture, but I did want revenge. But at the end of the day, my inner controls prevented me. And all of us have both inner and outer controls, whether we are deviant or not.